In the early 1930s, during the era of Prohibition, America is a dangerous place where alcohol has been banned, but the demand for it has never disappeared. Instead, the illegal liquor business has become extremely profitable, creating a world controlled by bootleggers, corrupt officials, and violent criminals. In Franklin County, Virginia, three brothers have built their lives around this dangerous business. The Bondurant brothers are known for being tough, independent, and almost impossible to intimidate. The eldest brother, Howard, is a physically powerful man who has survived the horrors of war and carries a quiet but frightening presence. Forrest Bondurant, the middle brother, is the real leader of the family. He is calm, calculating, and respected because people believe he cannot be killed. The youngest brother, Jack, is very different from the other two. He is still young, inexperienced, and fascinated by the excitement and money surrounding the bootlegging world. While Forrest and Howard have already earned their reputation, Jack wants to prove that he can become a man like his brothers. The Bondurant brothers operate their illegal liquor business from the countryside, producing and transporting moonshine while trying to stay away from the authorities. Their success has made them powerful, but it has also attracted unwanted attention. Forrest understands that the business is never truly safe. A single mistake can bring police officers, rival criminals, or federal agents directly to their doorstep. He therefore follows one important rule: never show fear and never trust anyone completely. Jack, however, sees things differently. To him, bootlegging looks like a chance to become rich and respected. He dreams about owning an expensive car and living a more exciting life. His friend Cricket, an intelligent and mechanically talented young man, helps the brothers with their equipment and transportation. Cricket is physically weaker than the Bondurants, but possesses a sharp mind and an ability to understand machines that becomes extremely valuable to the family business. Together, the brothers and Cricket form an unusual operation that continues to grow despite the dangers surrounding them. Everything changes when a new lawman arrives in Franklin County. His name is Charlie Rakes, and unlike the local officers who have learned to tolerate the illegal liquor trade, Rakes has no intention of simply looking the other way. He is a special deputy with a polished appearance and a cold personality, and he believes the people involved in bootlegging should be crushed. Rakes does not behave like an ordinary police officer. He uses fear, humiliation, and violence to establish control. His arrival immediately creates tension because he wants the Bondurants to understand that the old rules are finished. Forrest, however, refuses to be impressed by his authority. He has spent years surviving dangerous situations and has no desire to surrender his business simply because a new officer has entered the county. Jack watches the confrontation between his brothers and the new lawman carefully. For him, the arrival of Rakes represents both danger and opportunity. Jack wants to become involved in the more serious side of the business, believing that success will finally make him worthy of his brother's respect. Forrest tries to keep him away from unnecessary violence, knowing that Jack does not yet understand what the criminal world demands from people who enter it. Howard, meanwhile, remains loyal to Forrest and is ready to use his strength whenever the family is threatened. Their relationship is built on years of shared hardship, and the brothers understand that their survival depends on staying together. As Rakes begins tightening his control over the county, the Bondurant business becomes increasingly difficult. The authorities start demanding payments and cooperation, making it clear that the law is being used as another form of organized power. Forrest refuses to bow completely. His reputation has been built on the belief that the Bondurant brothers cannot be broken, and he knows that showing weakness could invite even greater trouble. Jack is fascinated by the money and confidence surrounding the business, but he slowly discovers that the glamorous side of bootlegging is only a small part of the reality. Behind every bottle of illegal liquor are threats, betrayal, bloodshed, and the possibility of losing everything. At the same time, Jack's personal life begins to change when he becomes interested in Bertha, a young woman whose quiet and innocent personality is completely different from the violent world Jack has entered. His feelings for her give him another reason to dream about a better future. But the more deeply Jack becomes involved in bootlegging, the harder it becomes to separate his ambitions from the dangers surrounding his family. Forrest recognizes that his younger brother is moving toward a life that could destroy him. But Jack is determined to prove that he is not simply the youngest Bondurant anymore. He wants to earn his place beside his brothers. The arrival of Rakes makes that goal much more dangerous. Instead of simply fighting criminals, Rakes appears determined to break the Bondurant family's independence. He understands that Forrest's reputation gives him influence over the local community, so defeating Forrest would send a message to everyone else involved in illegal liquor. Forrest realizes that the conflict is no longer just about business. It is becoming a personal battle over control, pride, and survival. The Bondurants have spent years believing that their family bond can protect them from almost anything, but now they face an enemy who is willing to use the authority of the law in ruthless ways. As tensions continue to rise, Jack finds himself standing closer to the center of the conflict than ever before. He has wanted excitement, respect, and money, but the reality of his chosen path is beginning to reveal itself. Forrest knows that once violence enters their world, there may be no easy way back. Howard is prepared to stand with his brothers regardless of the consequences, while cricket becomes increasingly important to their operation. Meanwhile, Rakes continues his campaign to force the Bondurants into submission. The peaceful countryside that once allowed the brothers to conduct their business in relative secrecy is slowly turning into a battlefield where every decision could determine who survives and who falls. Forrest refuses to surrender, but he also understands that courage alone may not be enough. The Bondurant brothers must protect their business, their family, and the people they care about, while dealing with an enemy who has the power of the law behind him. Jack is about to discover that becoming a man in the Bondurant family does not mean simply carrying a weapon or making money. It means accepting responsibility for the consequences of every choice. And as the pressure from Rakes becomes stronger, the brothers are pushed toward a confrontation that will test their loyalty, courage, and determination to survive in a world where violence can appear at any moment. The pressure on the Bondurant family continues to increase as Charlie Rakes makes it clear that he has no intention of allowing Forrest and his brothers to continue their bootlegging operation without interference. Rakes is not interested in simply collecting money or making an occasional arrest. He wants complete control, and he believes fear is the easiest way to achieve it. His polished appearance hides a cruel personality, and he treats the people around him as if they are beneath him. Forrest quickly understands that Rakes is different from the local authorities they have dealt with before. The local officers know the Bondurants and understand that the brothers have their own way of doing business, but Rakes has arrived with a mission. He wants to destroy their independence and demonstrate that nobody in Franklin County is beyond his reach. Forrest refuses to give him the satisfaction of backing down, which only makes Rakes more determined to break him. Meanwhile, Jack becomes more deeply involved in the family business. He has always admired Forrest and Howard, but he also feels that they still see him as the inexperienced younger brother who needs protection. Jack wants to prove that he can handle danger just as well as they can. His ambition grows stronger as he begins to understand how much money can be made through moonshine. He becomes involved in transporting liquor and dealing with customers, and every successful run makes him more confident. However, Forrest repeatedly warns him that confidence can quickly become stupidity when a person starts believing he is invincible. Forrest has survived because he knows when to fight and when to stay quiet. Jack has not yet learned that lesson. He sees the criminal world through the eyes of someone who still believes he can control the outcome, while Forrest knows that one unexpected betrayal can destroy an entire operation. Cricket continues to play an important role in the Bondurant's success. His intelligence and mechanical skills allow the brothers to improve their equipment and keep their operation running efficiently. Although Cricket does not possess the physical strength of Forrest or Howard, his loyalty is unquestionable. He understands that the Bondurant family has accepted him as one of their own, and he wants to help them succeed. His friendship with Jack also becomes important because Jack treats him with genuine respect. Together, they represent two very different sides of the younger generation. Jack wants adventure and recognition, while Cricket prefers solving problems with intelligence rather than violence. Their friendship gives Jack someone he can speak to honestly, especially when he begins struggling with the consequences of his choices. Jack's relationship with Bertha also develops. Bertha comes from a completely different environment, and her presence gives Jack a glimpse of a life outside violence and illegal business. He is attracted to her innocence and calm personality, and he begins imagining a future where he could have something more meaningful than money and reputation. But Jack's growing involvement in bootlegging creates a contradiction. He wants Bertha to see him as a respectable man, yet his daily life is becoming more dangerous. He cannot easily separate the person he wants to be from the person he is becoming. Forrest notices this change and understands that Jack is beginning to take risks because he wants to impress people. Forrest has no problem with his brother becoming stronger, but he knows that trying to prove yourself in the wrong situation can get you killed. Rex begins using his authority to squeeze the local bootleggers. His methods are brutal, and he makes it clear that cooperation is not optional. Anyone who refuses to follow his demands risks being arrested or beaten. The Bondurants become one of his biggest challenges because they are powerful enough to resist him. Forrest understands that if he gives Rakes everything he wants, the family will eventually lose control of its entire operation. But directly confronting a lawman also carries enormous risks. Forrest therefore tries to keep the conflict controlled, refusing to allow his brothers to react emotionally. Howard, on the other hand, is naturally more aggressive. He has little patience for people who threaten his family, and his frightening physical strength makes him a powerful protector. Forrest knows that Howard's loyalty is valuable, but he also knows that uncontrolled violence could give Rakes exactly the excuse he needs. Jack begins to experience the darker side of the business when he realizes that not every customer is simply interested in buying liquor. The moonshine trade connects the Bondurants to criminals, smugglers, and dangerous men who are willing to use violence to protect their interests. Jack had imagined that becoming successful would bring him respect, but he starts to discover that respect in this world often comes from fear. This creates a dangerous temptation. If people are afraid of you, they may obey you, but they may also be waiting for the right moment to betray you. Forrest understands this better than anyone. He has built his reputation over years, and he knows that a man who survives long enough in the bootlegging business learns to recognize danger before it arrives. As the conflict with Rakes intensifies, Jack becomes increasingly determined to demonstrate that he can contribute to the family. He begins taking actions that place him closer to serious danger, believing that success will finally make Forrest proud. His confidence is strengthened by his relationship with Bertha, because he wants to create enough wealth and security to build a future with her. But the criminal world does not care about Jack's dreams. Every time he makes progress, another threat appears. Forrest tries to protect him, but Jack does not want protection anymore. He wants independence. This creates tension between the brothers because Forrest's attempts to keep Jack safe are interpreted by Jack as a lack of trust. The situation becomes even more complicated when the Bondurants realize that Rakes is not simply targeting their business. He is trying to establish himself as the most powerful figure in the county. His cruelty is becoming a message to everyone who might resist him. Forrest recognizes that the battle cannot continue indefinitely because eventually someone will be seriously hurt, yet surrendering is not an option either. The Bondurants have built their entire lives around independence, and Forrest refuses to allow an outsider to destroy everything their family has created. Howard remains beside him, ready for whatever comes, while Jack moves closer and closer to the danger that his brothers have spent years learning how to survive. The contrast between Forrest and Jack becomes clearer as the pressure rises. Forrest is controlled, experienced, and almost impossible to intimidate. Jack is emotional, ambitious, and eager to prove himself. Howard represents raw physical power, while Cricket represents intelligence and loyalty. Together, they have managed to survive because each brother contributes something different. But Rakes is beginning to exploit their weaknesses. He understands that Jack is easier to provoke than Forrest, and he knows that forcing the youngest Bondurant into a reckless decision could create problems for the entire family. Jack's desire to prove himself therefore becomes one of the greatest dangers facing the brothers. Despite everything, Forrest refuses to abandon his family. His relationship with his brothers is not based on affection expressed through words. It is built through actions. He protects them, provides for them, and stands between them and danger whenever necessary. Jack slowly begins to understand that Forrest's warnings are not meant to control him. They come from experience. Forrest has already seen enough violence to know where this road can lead. Jack, however, still believes that he can walk through the darkness without becoming part of it. The Bondurants continue their operation while the threat surrounding them grows. Every bottle they produce brings money, but it also brings another reason for rakes and rival criminals to come after them. The brothers are now caught between two worlds, the law that wants to control them and the criminal world that wants their business. Their only real protection is their loyalty to each other. But loyalty will soon be tested by betrayal, violence, and choices that cannot be undone. Jack entered the bootlegging world because he wanted to become a man, but the coming conflict will force him to discover what kind of man he truly wants to be. The conflict between the Bondurant brothers and Charlie Rakes becomes more dangerous as Rakes continues using his authority to control the illegal liquor trade in Franklin County. Forrest understands that Rakes is not someone who can simply be ignored, because the new lawman is determined to make an example out of anyone who refuses to obey him. Forrest has spent years building his reputation by staying calm under pressure, and he knows that reacting emotionally would give Rakes an advantage. Instead, he continues running the family operation while carefully watching every move the authorities make. Howard remains close to him, ready to protect the family whenever necessary, while Jack becomes increasingly impatient with being treated like the youngest brother. Jack wants to take greater responsibility, and his growing confidence pushes him toward decisions that could have serious consequences. Jack's ambitions are closely connected to his feelings for Bertha. He sees her as someone who could represent a completely different future for him, far away from violence and criminal business. He wants to become wealthy enough to build a respectable life, but his method of making that money is anything but respectable. Bertha's quiet nature makes Jack more conscious of the person he wants to become. He does not want her to see him as a violent criminal, yet he also wants to impress her with his success. This conflict inside Jack makes him more determined to prove himself. Forrest can see that Jack is becoming emotionally involved in situations he does not fully understand, and he repeatedly tries to make him realize that the bootlegging business is not an adventure. It is a dangerous world where one wrong decision can cost someone their life. Cricket continues to help the Bondurants improve their operation. His mechanical knowledge allows him to create and repair equipment that makes the moonshine business more efficient. He is one of the few people Jack can trust completely, and their friendship grows stronger as Jack becomes more involved in the business. Cricket is not interested in becoming feared or respected through violence. He simply wants to help his friends and make a living using his intelligence. His loyalty becomes especially valuable because the Bondurants cannot trust everyone around them. The more successful they become, the more people want a piece of their business. Forrest knows that money attracts both friends and enemies, and he is careful about who gets close to the family. Rakes, meanwhile, continues to pressure the local bootleggers. His behavior becomes increasingly cruel, and he begins treating the law as a personal weapon. Instead of simply enforcing prohibition, he wants to control the people involved in the illegal liquor trade. He expects them to obey his demands, and anyone who refuses becomes a target. Forrest's refusal to surrender makes him particularly dangerous in Rakes's eyes. Rakes wants to break the myth surrounding the Bondurant brothers because their reputation gives other bootleggers confidence. If he can force Forrest to submit, everyone else may follow. Forrest understands this, which is why he refuses to let Rakes dictate his actions. The situation becomes more complicated when Jack begins taking a larger role in the family's business. He wants to show Forrest that he can handle serious responsibilities, and he starts making decisions without always asking his older brother for permission. Forrest becomes frustrated because Jack does not yet understand the consequences of his choices. To Jack, every successful deal feels like proof that he is becoming stronger. To Forrest, every unnecessary risk is another opportunity for the authorities or rival criminals to destroy them. The brothers care about each other, but their different attitudes toward danger create tension. Forrest wants Jack to survive. Jack wants Forrest to recognize him as an equal. At the same time, the Bondurants have to deal with the wider criminal network surrounding the moonshine trade. Their liquor is valuable, and other criminals recognize that the family has access to a profitable supply. The Bondurants are therefore surrounded by people who might cooperate with them today and betray them tomorrow. Forrest's greatest strength is his ability to recognize this reality. He never assumes that a business partner is a true friend. Howard is much more direct, relying on intimidation and physical force when negotiations fail. Jack, however, still has a tendency to believe that people will respect him if he behaves confidently. That difference in experience becomes increasingly important. Jack's desire to earn money and gain respect also brings him into situations where violence is never far away. He begins discovering that the people involved in bootlegging are not all like the Bondurants. Some are willing to hurt or kill others simply to increase their profits. Jack had previously viewed the business as a way to become rich, but he now sees how quickly it can turn into a struggle for survival. Forrest has always understood this, which explains why he is so protective of his younger brother. He knows that once Jack becomes known as a serious player, enemies will stop seeing him as an inexperienced young man and start treating him as a threat. Rakes's campaign against the Bondurants eventually creates a situation where Forrest can no longer avoid confrontation. The lawman has made it clear that he will continue applying pressure until the family gives in. Forrest refuses to surrender, but he also knows that openly declaring war against the authorities would put everyone around him at risk. The family has to find a way to continue their business while protecting themselves from arrest and violence. Their independence is being challenged from every direction, and the pressure is beginning to expose the limits of their strength. Jack is especially affected by the growing conflict because he wants to prove himself in front of both his brothers and Bertha. He believes that becoming successful in the bootlegging business will give him the confidence and status he needs to build a future with her. But the more he becomes involved, the more difficult it becomes to maintain that dream. Bertha represents innocence and peace, while Jack's world is becoming increasingly violent. He begins to understand that he cannot simply take money from a dangerous business and expect the consequences to disappear. Every deal creates enemies, every confrontation creates new risks, and every victory makes someone else want revenge. Forrest continues trying to keep the family together. He does not express his fears openly, but his actions reveal how much responsibility he feels. Howard is always ready to stand beside him, and cricket remains an important part of their operation. Jack, however, is moving into a new stage of his life. He is no longer satisfied with watching his brothers from the sidelines. He wants to participate, make decisions, and earn his own reputation. Forrest knows that this ambition could either make Jack stronger or get him killed. The Bondurant family is now facing a struggle that goes far beyond the illegal liquor business. Rakes wants control, the criminals want profit, and Jack wants recognition. Forrest wants only to protect the family and preserve the independence they have fought to maintain. These different motivations are slowly pushing everyone toward an inevitable confrontation. The Bondurants may have survived difficult times before, but this enemy is different because he can use the power of the law against them. And as Jack takes another step deeper into the dangerous world his brothers have warned him about, the consequences of his choices begin to move closer to the entire family. The situation in Franklin County becomes increasingly dangerous as the Bondurant brothers find themselves caught between their successful moonshine operation and the growing power of Charlie Rakes. Forrest knows that the arrival of the new deputy has changed everything. In the past, the Bondurants were able to operate according to their own rules, producing liquor in the countryside and selling it to people who were willing to pay. They had enemies, but most of those enemies understood that the Bondurant family was not easy to challenge. Rakes is different because he has the authority of the law behind him, and he is willing to use that authority in cruel and dishonest ways. Forrest refuses to surrender, but he also realizes that simply being tougher than everyone else may not be enough this time. The family needs to be careful because every move they make can now be used against them. Jack is becoming more confident in the business, and that confidence is beginning to change him. At first, he only wanted to prove that he could contribute alongside Forrest and Howard. Now he is starting to enjoy the feeling of being respected by people who once saw him as a harmless young man. The money from the moonshine business gives him opportunities he never had before, and his growing relationship with Bertha makes him think about the future. He wants to build a life with her, but he also wants to become someone worthy of her. Unfortunately, Jack begins to believe that wealth and reputation can solve every problem. Forrest understands that this is dangerous thinking. In their world, money can buy equipment, cars, and opportunities, but it cannot guarantee loyalty, safety, or survival. Jack is learning that lesson slowly, and every mistake brings him closer to serious consequences. Cricket remains one of Jack's closest friends and continues helping the Bondurants with their operation. His mechanical talent makes him extremely useful, especially when the family needs to improve their equipment or solve problems that would otherwise stop production. Cricket is not a fighter like Howard, and he does not have Forrest's intimidating reputation, but he has something equally valuable: intelligence and dedication. Jack trusts him because Cricket does not judge him for his ambitions. Their friendship gives Jack someone he can rely on when the pressure from the business and his family becomes difficult to handle. Cricket also understands that Jack is changing. The young man who once dreamed about becoming a successful businessman is now beginning to understand how much violence and danger are connected to that success. Forrest, meanwhile, continues trying to keep the family operation under control. He knows that the moonshine business depends on secrecy and loyalty. If too many people learn where the liquor is being produced or how it is being transported, the authorities could destroy everything. Forrest therefore tries to keep his brothers focused and disciplined. Howard is always prepared to respond with force, while Jack is eager to take risks. Forrest has to balance both personalities, making sure Howard's aggression does not create unnecessary problems while preventing Jack's ambition from turning into recklessness. His role is not simply that of an older brother, he is effectively the person holding the entire family together. Rakes continues his campaign against the Bondurants, and his methods become more disturbing. He believes that fear is the best way to control people, so he humiliates and threatens those who refuse to cooperate. He wants Forrest to understand that the rules have changed, but Forrest refuses to show weakness. This creates a dangerous psychological battle between them. Rakes wants to make Forrest afraid, while Forrest wants to make Rakes realize that intimidation will not work. Neither man is willing to back down. The difference is that Forrest is fighting to protect his family and livelihood, while Rakes is increasingly driven by pride and the desire for power. Their conflict is becoming personal, and that makes compromise almost impossible. Jack's relationship with Bertha becomes another source of emotional pressure. Bertha is not interested in the violent world Jack has entered, and her presence forces him to think about what kind of life he really wants. Jack wants to escape the limitations of his past, but he does not yet understand that the money he is earning comes with a price. He begins to dream about creating a respectable future, perhaps leaving the dangerous business behind one day. Yet every new step he takes into the bootlegging world makes that future harder to reach. He is caught between two identities, the young man who wants love and stability, and the ambitious bootlegger who wants respect and power. The Bondurants also have to be careful around other people involved in the illegal liquor trade. Their success has attracted attention, and not everyone who approaches them has good intentions. Forrest understands that business relationships in this environment are often temporary. People cooperate when there is money to be made and turn against one another when the balance changes. Jack has not developed the same instincts. He is still impressed by people who appear powerful, and this can make him vulnerable to manipulation. Forrest tries to teach him that appearances mean very little in their world. A person who smiles at you today may be the same person preparing to betray you tomorrow. As the pressure increases, Jack starts to understand why Forrest has always been so careful. The business is not simply about producing alcohol and selling it. It involves transportation, secrecy, protection, negotiations, and constant awareness of who might be watching. A single mistake can bring the authorities directly to them. Jack begins seeing that Forrest's calm behavior is not weakness. It is the result of years of experience. Forrest has survived because he knows how to control his emotions when other people are trying to provoke him. Jack, however, still has something to prove, and that desire makes him easier to manipulate. Howard's loyalty remains absolute. He does not care about money or social approval as much as he cares about his brothers. If Forrest decides they need to fight, Howard will fight. If Forrest decides they need to disappear, Howard will follow. His physical strength makes him a frightening opponent, but Forrest knows that Howard's temper can also become a liability. The three brothers are strongest when they work together, yet their different personalities sometimes create friction. Forrest thinks strategically, Howard reacts physically, and Jack acts emotionally. Their survival depends on keeping these differences from tearing the family apart. Rakes eventually makes it clear that he intends to push the Bondurants until they either surrender or make a mistake. Forrest realizes that the conflict cannot continue forever without someone getting hurt. But surrender would mean allowing Rakes to control their business and dictate the future of the family. Forrest has spent his entire life refusing to be controlled, and he cannot accept that. He therefore prepares himself for the possibility that the situation will become violent. He does not seek a fight, but he is ready when one comes to him. Jack's transformation is becoming more obvious. He is no longer simply the youngest Bondurant watching his brothers from a distance. He is becoming a participant in the family business, and with that comes responsibility. He begins to realize that his decisions can affect Forrest, Howard, Cricket, and Bertha. The world he once considered exciting now feels much more serious. He still wants success, but he is beginning to understand that success without responsibility can destroy everything a person cares about. As the Bondurants continue their operation under increasing pressure, the line between business and war begins to disappear. Rakes wants control, the bootleggers want profit, and Forrest wants freedom for his family. Jack wants to prove that he can survive beside his brothers, while Cricket simply wants to remain loyal to the people who have accepted him. Every character is being pushed toward a decision, and the consequences are becoming harder to avoid. Forrest can sense that the family is approaching a moment when they will no longer be able to remain neutral. The Bondurants have survived by standing together, but now their enemies are beginning to discover exactly what matters most to them. And once those weaknesses are exposed, the battle for control of Franklin County is going to become far more personal. The Bondurant brothers are now facing a situation that is becoming impossible to control because Charlie Rakes is no longer satisfied with threatening them from a distance. His campaign against the bootleggers is becoming more aggressive, and his hatred for Forrest is turning into something personal. Forrest understands that Rakes wants to destroy the reputation that has protected the Bondurant family for years. If people begin believing that the Bondurants can be pushed around, every rival in the county will see an opportunity. That is why Forrest refuses to surrender, even though he knows exactly how dangerous the situation has become. Howard stands firmly beside him, while Jack is increasingly determined to prove that he can handle himself without being protected by his older brothers. The family remains united, but the pressure is beginning to reveal how differently each brother responds when their survival is threatened. Jack's growing confidence leads him deeper into the moonshine business. He is fascinated by the money and the respect that come with being associated with the Bondurants, but he is also beginning to understand the responsibility that comes with it. His relationship with Bertha gives him another reason to want a better future. Jack does not want to spend his entire life surrounded by violence, yet he cannot deny how strongly he is attracted to the power and independence that the business provides. He dreams about having enough money to create a comfortable life, and he believes becoming successful will prove to everyone that he is no longer the inexperienced youngest brother. But Forrest keeps warning him that the business does not reward people simply because they work hard. It rewards people who survive, and survival often requires knowing when not to take a risk. Cricket remains essential to the Bondurants because his mechanical knowledge helps keep their operation functioning. He can solve technical problems that would leave other people helpless, and his calm personality provides a contrast to the violence surrounding the brothers. Jack trusts Cricket deeply, and their friendship becomes even more important as Jack starts experiencing the consequences of his choices. Cricket is one of the few people who can speak honestly to Jack without trying to intimidate him. He sees that Jack is becoming more confident, But he also understands that confidence can become dangerous when a person enters a world where enemies are constantly looking for weakness. Cricket's loyalty to the family is genuine, and although he is not physically powerful, his intelligence makes him an important part of the Bondurant's survival. The growing conflict with Rakes also forces Forrest to become more cautious about the people around him. He knows that law enforcement is not the only threat. Rival bootleggers are watching the Bondurants, and some may be willing to cooperate with Rakes if it helps them gain control of the liquor business. Forrest therefore keeps information limited and refuses to trust easily. Howard understands this instinct because he has always been protective of the family, but Jack is still learning. He wants to believe that people can be dealt with honestly, yet the world around him is teaching him that honesty is often a luxury. Forrest's experience tells him that the most dangerous enemy is not always the person standing directly in front of you. Sometimes it is the person smiling beside you while secretly waiting for an opportunity. Rakes continues using intimidation to make the community understand that he is in charge. He wants the bootleggers to believe that resistance is pointless. His methods are designed not only to punish individuals but also to create fear throughout the county. Forrest sees through this strategy. He knows that Rakes's power depends heavily on people believing that he cannot be challenged. The more afraid people become, the easier it is for Rakes to control them. Forrest therefore refuses to give him the satisfaction of fear. His silence and resistance frustrate Rakes because the deputy wants a visible victory over the Bondurants. Forrest's refusal to bend becomes a challenge to Rakes's authority, and the deputy begins looking for ways to attack the family where it hurts most. Jack's relationship with Bertha becomes increasingly important because she represents the peaceful life he wants, but may be unable to reach. When Jack is with her, he can temporarily forget the dangerous business surrounding his family. He wants to be seen as a respectable man rather than a criminal, but his actions make that difficult. The irony is that Jack is trying to use the illegal liquor trade to create a stable future, yet every step deeper into the business puts that future further away. Bertha's presence makes Jack question whether money and reputation are really worth the dangers he is accepting. Still, Jack believes that if he becomes successful enough, he can eventually leave the violence behind. Forrest is not convinced. He knows that people rarely walk away from a dangerous business without consequences following them. As Rakes continues tightening his grip, the Bondurants realize that the danger is no longer limited to their business. The people closest to them could also become targets. Forrest has always believed that family is the most important thing, and he understands that an enemy who cannot defeat him directly may try to hurt someone he cares about. This possibility makes him even more protective. Jack begins realizing that his actions do not affect only himself. If he makes a reckless decision, Forrest and Howard may have to deal with the consequences. Cricket could also be dragged into danger, and Bertha could become caught in a world she never wanted to enter. Jack's dream of becoming a man therefore becomes more complicated because real maturity means understanding how your choices affect other people. The moonshine operation continues, but the atmosphere around the Bondurants has changed. What once felt like a profitable family business now feels like a battle that could erupt at any moment. Every journey, every meeting, and every deal carries a new level of risk. Forrest tries to keep the operation moving while avoiding unnecessary attention, but Rakes is determined to force a confrontation. The deputy believes that if he can make Forrest surrender, the entire bootlegging community will understand who holds the real power. Forrest sees the situation differently. To him, surrendering would mean allowing an abusive man to control the future of his family. Jack is beginning to develop the confidence Forrest has always wanted him to have, but he is gaining that confidence through painful lessons. He starts understanding that being a Bondurant is not about having a reputation for being fearless. It is about having the courage to protect people even when you are afraid. Forrest's reputation comes from surviving difficult situations, not from seeking them. Jack slowly begins to appreciate the difference. He still wants to prove himself, but he is starting to realize that the greatest challenge may not be defeating an enemy, it may be learning how to control his own pride. Meanwhile, Rakes becomes increasingly obsessed with the Bondurants. His authority has not been enough to force Forrest into submission, and that failure damages his pride. Instead of stepping back, he becomes more determined to find a way to break the family. Forrest senses that something worse is coming, but he cannot simply abandon the business or run away. The Bondurants have spent years building their lives around their independence, and Forrest is unwilling to let Rakes take that away from them. Howard is ready for whatever happens, while Jack is finally beginning to understand that the coming confrontation may demand more from him than courage. The Bondurant brothers remain together as the pressure reaches a dangerous level. Forrest's calm determination, Howard's strength, Jack's ambition, and Cricket's intelligence have allowed them to survive against difficult odds. But their enemies are beginning to attack the weaknesses behind their reputation. Rakes has discovered that fear and pride can be used as weapons, and Jack's desire to prove himself could become a major vulnerability. The family is approaching a point where staying quiet will no longer protect them. Soon the Bondurants will have to decide how far they are willing to go to defend their freedom, their business, and the people they love. The pressure surrounding the Bondurant family reaches a new level as Forrest realizes that Charlie Rakes is no longer simply trying to control the moonshine business. Rakes has become obsessed with proving that the Bondurants can be defeated, and his obsession makes him increasingly dangerous. Forrest understands that a man like Rakes cannot be trusted to follow normal rules, especially because he uses his position as a lawman to intimidate people rather than protect them. The Bondurants have survived for years because they know how to keep their operation hidden and how to respond when trouble appears, but Rakes is creating a different kind of threat. He is making the entire county unstable, and the people around the Bondurants are beginning to realize that refusing to cooperate with him could have serious consequences. Forrest continues trying to protect the family while keeping their business alive. He knows that Howard is willing to fight anyone who threatens them, but Forrest does not want unnecessary violence to make the situation worse. Howard's strength has protected the brothers many times, yet Forrest understands that brute force cannot solve every problem. If they attack the wrong person, Rakes could use it as an excuse to arrest them or send more men after them. Forrest therefore tries to remain calm, but the situation is becoming increasingly difficult to control. He can sense that Rakes is looking for a reason to strike at the family, and he knows that eventually the conflict may become impossible to avoid. Jack is also changing rapidly. His earlier desire to prove himself has now become a deeper understanding of what it means to stand beside his brothers. He has seen enough of the business to realize that the money is not worth much if the people he loves are destroyed in the process. At the same time, Jack cannot simply walk away. He has become involved with the family operation, and his relationship with Bertha has made him even more determined to create a future for himself. Bertha represents the possibility of peace, but Jack's world is moving in the opposite direction. The closer he gets to her, the more he realizes that his actions could eventually bring danger to her as well. Cricket continues supporting the Bondurants, and his loyalty becomes increasingly important. He is not interested in proving himself through violence, but he understands that his friends are facing a serious enemy. His mechanical skills keep the moonshine operation running, while his friendship with Jack gives the younger Bondurant a source of support. Cricket sees the changes in Jack and understands that Jack is becoming more serious. The excitement that once attracted him to bootlegging is fading as the consequences become more real. Jack is discovering that there is a huge difference between imagining yourself as a dangerous man and actually having to make decisions when someone's life is at risk. Rakes, meanwhile, becomes more aggressive in his attempts to control the county. He believes that the Bondurants have become symbols of resistance, and he wants to destroy that symbol. Forrest's refusal to bow down makes Rakes look less powerful, and Rakes cannot tolerate the idea that someone under his authority can continue operating independently. He therefore increases the pressure on the people connected to the Bondurants. His goal is to isolate Forrest and make him feel that protecting his family is impossible. But Forrest has survived too much to surrender simply because someone threatens him. His greatest strength is his refusal to panic, and Rakes is beginning to realize that intimidation does not work on him as easily as it works on others. The relationship between the three brothers becomes especially important during this period. Forrest is the leader, Howard is the protector, and Jack is the younger brother who is finally becoming an active member of the family. They do not always agree, but they understand that their survival depends on staying together. Forrest's greatest fear is not losing the business, it is losing one of his brothers. He has already built his entire life around protecting the people closest to him, and he knows that Rakes could use that loyalty against him. Howard would gladly sacrifice himself for Forrest, and Jack is beginning to develop the same instinct. The danger is that their willingness to protect one another could also make them vulnerable. Jack's connection with Bertha grows stronger. giving him a reason to imagine a life outside Franklin County's violent world. He wants to become the kind of man who can provide security for her, but he begins to understand that real security cannot be built on violence forever. Bertha's innocence also highlights how far Jack has traveled from the young man he once was. He is becoming more confident, but that confidence comes with a darker understanding of life. He has learned that people can lie, betray, and hurt others for money or power. He is beginning to understand Forrest's philosophy. Survival depends not on being the strongest person in the room, but on knowing who can be trusted and when danger is coming. The conflict also creates tension between Jack and Forrest. Jack wants to make his own decisions while Forrest continues to worry that his younger brother is moving too quickly. Jack sees Forrest's protection as a limitation, but Forrest sees it as responsibility. He knows that Jack still has a tendency to let pride guide his actions. Jack wants to prove that he is brave, but Forrest knows that bravery without judgment can become recklessness. Their disagreement is not caused by a lack of love. In fact, it exists because they care deeply about each other. Forrest simply understands that the criminal world does not forgive mistakes, and he does not want Jack to learn that lesson through tragedy. As the tension grows, the Bondurants become increasingly aware that someone may eventually betray them. The moonshine business is profitable, and people are always willing to cooperate when there is money involved. But when the authorities increase the pressure, loyalty becomes harder to maintain. Forrest knows that a frightened person can reveal information simply to save himself. This is why he becomes more cautious about the people around the family. The Bondurants have survived because they have kept their secrets close, but Rakes is creating enough fear that even strong alliances could begin to collapse. The situation becomes even more dangerous when the consequences of Rakes' campaign begin reaching people who have nothing to do with the Bondurants' business. Forrest understands that Rakes wants to create an atmosphere where everyone is afraid of challenging him. The deputy's cruelty is no longer simply an obstacle to the Bondurants, it is becoming a threat to the entire community. Forrest's refusal to surrender therefore begins to represent something bigger than his own family. He is one of the few men powerful enough to resist, and Rakes knows that defeating him could send a message to everyone else. Jack starts to understand this responsibility as well. His earlier dreams of money and status seem less important when he sees what Rakes is willing to do. He still wants a future with Bertha, but now he knows that achieving that future may require him to protect the people around him first. His character begins moving away from youthful ambition and toward maturity. He does not become fearless. Instead, he begins understanding that courage means acting despite fear. This is exactly the lesson Forrest has been trying to teach him. Forrest prepares himself for the possibility that the conflict will eventually become violent. He does not want to start a war with the authorities, but he knows that Rakes may leave him no choice. Howard remains ready to fight, and Jack is no longer willing to hide behind his brothers. Cricket continues doing everything he can to support the family. Each man has a different role, but their loyalty connects them. The Bondurants are strongest when they act together, and Forrest knows that their enemies will try to separate them. Rake's obsession with destroying the Bondurants continues to grow, and the family realizes that waiting for him to disappear is no longer an option. The conflict has moved beyond business, and neither side is willing to give up. Forrest has spent years building a reputation that says the Bondurants cannot be broken, while Rakes is determined to prove that reputation is meaningless. Jack now stands directly between his old life and the dangerous future he has chosen. He wants love, respect, and freedom, but all three are becoming harder to achieve. The Bondurants have reached a critical point. Forrest knows that the next confrontation could change the family forever, while Howard is prepared to defend his brothers regardless of the consequences. Jack has finally started to understand the real cost of the world he entered, and Cricket remains loyal despite the increasing danger. Rakes, however, is not backing away. He believes the Bondurants must be crushed, and his determination makes a peaceful solution seem almost impossible. The family has survived because they have always stood together, but now they are facing an enemy who is willing to attack not only their business, but everything that gives them the strength to keep fighting. The confrontation between the Bondurant brothers and Charlie Rakes finally reaches its most dangerous stage. Rakes has spent so long trying to control Forrest that his actions have become completely personal. Forrest knows that the only way to protect his family is to stand his ground, even though he understands how much power Rakes has. Howard remains beside him, ready to fight, while Jack has finally stopped thinking about proving himself and started thinking about protecting the people he loves. The conflict becomes violent, and the Bondurants are forced to fight back against Rakes and the men supporting him. Forrest takes the threat seriously because he knows that Rakes will not hesitate to hurt innocent people. Howard's strength becomes extremely important during the confrontation, while Jack is forced to face the reality of the dangerous world he entered. The young man who once dreamed about becoming a successful bootlegger now understands that survival is much more important than money or reputation. Jack is especially worried about Bertha. His feelings for her have made him realize that he wants a different future, one where he can leave the violence behind. But before he can build that future, he has to survive the conflicts surrounding his family. Bertha also becomes a symbol of the peaceful life Jack has been trying to reach. The danger makes him understand that he cannot keep living recklessly if he truly wants to protect her. Forrest refuses to let Rakes destroy everything the family has built. His calm nature remains one of his greatest strengths, even when the situation becomes extremely violent. Howard fights with the same loyalty he has shown throughout their lives, proving once again that he would risk everything for his brothers. Jack also steps forward, showing that he has finally become someone Forrest can depend on rather than someone who constantly needs protection. The confrontation exposes the difference between Forrest and Rakes. Forrest is fighting because he wants his family to survive, while Rakes is driven by pride and his desire for control. Rakes believed that fear would make the Bondurants surrender, but he underestimated their loyalty. The brothers have already lost too much to allow him to decide their future, and they are willing to fight back even when the consequences are severe. Cricket also becomes caught in the danger surrounding the family. His loyalty to Jack and the Bondurants has placed him in a world far more violent than anything he originally expected. Jack realizes that his friend has taken risks because of his connection to the family, making the situation even more personal. The Bondurants are no longer fighting only for their business. They are fighting for the people who have become part of their family. As the conflict reaches its final stage, Forrest, Howard, and Jack are forced to rely completely on one another. Their differences no longer matter. Forrest's experience, Howard's strength, and Jack's courage come together when they need each other most. The brothers have spent their lives surviving difficult circumstances. But this battle is different because their enemy has deliberately targeted the family bond that has kept them strong. The struggle with Rakes moves toward a final confrontation that will determine whether the Bondurants can finally regain control of their lives. Jack has learned that courage is not about chasing danger. It is about standing up when the people you love need you. Forrest has protected his family for years, and Howard has always been willing to fight beside him. Now all three brothers must face the consequences of everything that has happened. The Bondurants may have entered the bootlegging business for money and independence, but the conflict with Rakes has transformed their priorities. Their family matters more than the liquor, and their freedom matters more than their reputation. As the final showdown approaches, they understand that there may be no easy ending. One side will have to fall, and the Bondurants are determined that it will not be them. Bondurant brothers and Charlie Rakes reaches a dangerous stage. Rakes is determined to break Forrest's reputation and take control of the bootlegging business, but Forrest refuses to surrender. He knows that Rakes is using his position as a lawman to frighten people into obedience. Forrest remains calm, while Howard is ready to fight anyone who threatens the family. Jack, meanwhile, is no longer the inexperienced young man who once watched his brothers from the sidelines. He is beginning to understand that being a Bondurant means accepting responsibility for the people around him. Jack's relationship with Bertha also becomes more important. He wants a peaceful future with her, but his involvement in the moonshine business keeps pulling him deeper into danger. Bertha represents the life Jack wishes he could have, far away from violence and criminals. Jack slowly realizes that earning money is not enough if his actions put the people he loves at risk. Still, he cannot simply abandon Forrest and Howard while they are facing Rakes. Cricket continues helping the family with his intelligence and mechanical skills. His friendship with Jack remains strong, and he understands that Jack is becoming more serious about protecting the people around him. Forrest also becomes increasingly cautious because he knows that Rakes may try to attack the family through someone close to them. The Bondurants have survived because of loyalty, but fear can make even loyal people turn against each other. Rakes grows more frustrated because Forrest refuses to be intimidated. Instead of backing down, he becomes more determined to destroy the Bondurants. Forrest realizes that a confrontation is becoming unavoidable, but he does not want to put his brothers in unnecessary danger. Howard, however, is prepared to defend the family no matter what happens. Jack finally understands that his brother's warnings were never about keeping him weak. They were trying to keep him alive. As the pressure increases, Jack begins to mature. He no longer wants to prove himself simply by being brave or making money. He wants to protect his family and build a future with Bertha. But Rakes is making that future harder to achieve. The Bondurants now understand that they cannot keep running their business while pretending the threat will disappear. Rakes has made the conflict personal, and soon the brothers will have to face him directly. Forrest, Howard, Jack, and Cricket remain united as the danger closes in. Their strength comes from standing together, but Rakes is determined to find a way to break that bond. The final struggle is getting closer, and the Bondurants are about to discover just how much they will have to sacrifice to protect their family and their freedom. The situation becomes even more dangerous as Charlie Rakes continues his campaign against the Bondurant family. Forrest understands that Rakes will not stop until he has completely broken their resistance, so the brothers begin preparing themselves for whatever comes next. Forrest remains calm and careful, while Howard is ready to use force if necessary. Jack has also changed. He is no longer chasing excitement or trying to prove that he is tough. Now he understands that every decision he makes can affect the people he loves. Jack's feelings for Bertha become stronger, but the dangerous life he has chosen makes their future uncertain. He wants to leave the violence behind eventually and build a peaceful life with her. Yet the conflict with Rakes keeps pulling him deeper into trouble. Bertha gives Jack something worth fighting for, while his brothers give him another reason to stay. Jack begins realizing that becoming a man is not about being feared, it is about protecting the people who depend on you. Meanwhile, Forrest and Howard continue their moonshine operation despite the increasing pressure. Forrest knows that Rakes is watching them closely, so he tries to avoid giving the lawman any advantage. But Rakes is becoming more reckless and personal in his actions. He wants to make Forrest afraid, yet Forrest refuses to show weakness. This only makes Rakes more determined to attack the Bondurants. Cricket remains loyal to Jack and the family. His intelligence and mechanical skills continue to help the operation, but he is also becoming aware of how serious the danger has become. The Bondurants are surrounded by enemies, and Cricket understands that even one mistake could bring disaster. Jack appreciates his friendship more than ever because Cricket is one of the few people he can completely trust. The conflict finally begins moving toward direct violence. Forrest knows that Rakes is not going to disappear, and running away would mean giving him control. Howard is prepared for the fight, while Jack refuses to stay behind. Forrest has spent much of the story trying to protect his younger brother, but Jack now wants to stand beside him rather than behind him. The brothers are stronger together, and they know their survival depends on staying united. Rakes, however, believes he has the advantage because he represents the law. He underestimates the Bondurants and fails to understand how far they are willing to go to protect one another. His arrogance pushes the conflict closer to its breaking point. Forrest realizes that there may be no peaceful way out anymore, and the family prepares for the confrontation that has been building since Rakes first arrived. Jack finally understands the true cost of the life he entered. The money and reputation that once attracted him no longer seem as important as his family and Bertha. He has grown from an inexperienced young man into someone willing to accept responsibility. But maturity has arrived at a terrible moment, because the people he loves are now in greater danger than ever. With Rakes closing in and the Bondurants refusing to surrender, the battle becomes unavoidable. Forrest, Howard, Jack, and Cricket are forced to depend on one another as their enemies move closer. The family has survived because they never abandoned each other, but now that loyalty is about to be tested by the most dangerous confrontation they have ever faced. After everything the Bondurant brothers have endured, Their long fight against Charlie Rakes finally comes to an end. Forrest, Howard, and Jack have been pushed through violence, betrayal, fear, and loss, but they never completely abandon one another. Forrest remains the calm and determined leader of the family, while Howard continues protecting his brothers with his incredible strength and loyalty. Jack, however, has changed the most. He entered the dangerous world of bootlegging as a young man who wanted money, excitement, and respect, but the events around Rakes force him to understand the real price of that life. He learns that being brave is not about proving how dangerous you can be. True courage means standing up for the people you love when there is something important at stake. Jack's relationship with Bertha gives him hope for a better future. He finally understands that the life he wants cannot be built entirely around violence and illegal business. Bertha represents peace and a chance to leave the dangerous world behind. Cricket also remains an important friend whose loyalty proves that family can sometimes be created through trust rather than blood. Forrest and Howard have protected Jack for years, but now Jack has grown enough to stand beside them. The brothers may have different personalities, but their loyalty keeps them connected. Charlie Rakes believed that his authority would make everyone afraid of him, but he underestimated the Bondurants. His obsession with controlling them ultimately becomes his weakness. Forrest refuses to surrender. Howard refuses to abandon his brothers, and Jack finally learns what it means to take responsibility. The conflict leaves permanent scars, but the family survives. In the end, the story is not really about moonshine or money. It is about brotherhood, loyalty, courage, and survival. The Bondurants lose their innocence along the way, but they discover that their greatest strength was always the bond between them. With Rakes defeated and the immediate danger finally behind them, Jack can look toward a future with Bertha, while Forrest and Howard remain by his side. Their journey proves that even in a violent and corrupt world, loyalty and family can give people the strength to survive almost anything.